Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, Venice, the Surrounding Powers. For the last couple of years, the podcast has been looking into Cornish folklore material, and I think for now we're done with that. There is a 140-page free guide on the blog that accompanies the podcast. This year, instead, we'll be looking at Venice. I had expected to put out one Venice episode a month, but given the strange times we are in, I'm just throwing all the material I can find up onto the blog and into the podcast to give you something amusing to do. So far with Venice, we've only talked about the story of the rotting princess, which is core to the idea of what I'll be going for with Venice. But before we get into the folklore and the depths of things, we need to look at the mundane world and the surrounding powers. And that's this episode. Venice was built by refugees. They took to the islands in the middle of the lagoon to avoid waves of barbarians who swept into Italy as the empire in the west declined. These people were not conquered by the wanderers. It's important to the Venetians, it's important to their identity that they are Rome unfallen. For a long time, Venice was, in some sense, distantly beholden to the Roman emperor in Constantinople. It's the only part of Italy that is explicitly not part of the Carolingian Empire. Charlemagne's son, Pepin, attempted to invade Venice on his father's orders, and he was able to take a sliver of land, but he was unable to force the surrender of the inhabitants. This is thought to have pushed the Venetians deeper into the lagoon to the area around the Rialto, which is now the centre of their government. Pepin and his father agreed that Venice did not belong to them, it belonged to the Empire of the East. It's in the Roman tribunal because, I presume whoever laid out the tribunal maps just put all of modern Italy together, much as they've put Languedoc Tribunal where no one speaks the Languedoc, and Normandy Tribunal doesn't include the Norman possessions in either Aquitaine or England. If we were to redraw it, for the sake of an interesting outcome, I'd put it in Thebes. But moving on, Venice is beholden to the emperors, but they are very far away, and for many centuries now, they've not really had any capacity to punish the Venetians if they're insubordinate. The Venetians have the last republic in the West, accepting the order. Power is effectively held by an elaborately constrained oligarchy of wealthy families. The Doge, the leader of Venice, is deliberately checked at virtually every turn, and the idea that the role might be inherited is abominable to the Venetians. Technically, he's a Duke of the Eastern Empire, that's where the name comes from. This grants him a certain amount of magic resistance. Spiritual powers. The Venetian church is not a prominent landholder, so its potentates have a lot less money than elsewhere, and because they lack money, they lack military power. Venice sits out the investiture controversy, which pits the Pope against the Western Emperor. It supplies aid to the Lombard League and to the Pope, surreptitiously, but it acts publicly as a broker between the two sides. The battles end in 1177, in the Treaty of Venice, where Venice's allies basically get everything that they want. Venice's resident bishop is at Castello, and it's part of the, essentially, archbishopric of Grado. Now, the patriarchs of Grado have done business from Venice itself for decades, from a church which would otherwise be in Castello, and this causes tension. Grado is also in a feud with the Patriarchate of Aquileia, which was formed by a now healed schism centuries ago. It's also in a feud with the Patriarchate of Zara, which is in modern Zadar. Technically, Grado is senior to Zara, but it's weird for an archbishop to be inferior to another archbishop. It's unique in Italy. I know English listeners are thinking, wait a minute, Canterbury, York. No, that's weird. The Austro-Hungarians in Zara don't like this and keep trying to be free of it. Temporal powers. More directly relevant to the history of the Venetians is the city of Ravenna. Ravenna was the headquarters of the final Western Roman emperors, and also of the Byzantine governor of Italy during the periodic re-establishments of imperial rule. There are several occasions when whoever was ruling the Italian mainland used the area around Ravenna to try and invade Venice. Venice has commercial rivals in Genoa and Pisa, but these are on the west coast of Italy. They don't challenge Venice's stronghold over the trading lanes in the Adriatic. There are three main sites of significance here that Venice needs to worry about. These are Zara, Bari, and Corfu. Zara, which we've covered a little before in spiritual terms, is a city on the Dalmatian coast. The Venetians claim the trading rights in those lands were given to them by the emperor. It is rebellious, it is a nest of pirates, and at times it tries to play Venice, Hungary, and Constantinople off against each other. When the leaders of the Fourth Crusade weren't able to pay for the ships and supplies they'd ordered from the Venetians requested the sack of the city of Zara in trade, which they then performed. This led to the Pope cursing the Crusade. It was a very unedifying spectacle, and it led on to far worse things. While they were there, other temptations were thrown in their way. But moving on. Bari is the second most powerful trade port in the Adriatic after Venice. It has many of the advantages of Venice, but it doesn't have the long sail up the Adriatic. It was the final fortress of the Byzantine Empire in southern Italy before it was taken by the Normans in the 11th century. Now, in 1220, it's a rising power, and the Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick II, King of Sicily, owns it, and it's one of his great ports. A sufficiently strong Bari could use its navy to bottle Venice inside the Adriatic. Corfu is an island off the coast of mainland Greece, at the base of the Adriatic, and like Bari, a strong fleet that was there could disrupt Venice's trade. This is what happens when the Normans hold it for a while. During the 10th century, the Venetians conquered it and gave it back to the Byzantine emperors, but after the damage to the empire in the Fourth Crusade, it was seized first by Venice, and then by Venice's rivals, the Genoese, and then things got complicated. But after about a century, the Venetians take it over, and it becomes their main naval base. They simply can't allow their enemies to hold it, and this is a decisive shift, because Venice has previously not wanted to be a colonial land power, it's wanted to be a trading empire. So that gives us a formal start. Next time we go to Venice, we find that there's an alternative there to the wand, particularly suited to the Venetian ladies. Your saga may vary.